The War of Crystals. The Crystal Kingdom was a magnificent sight. Spires of crystal rose from the icy north, shining bright amongst the grey clouds. Dozens of crystal ponies went about their business, wrapped in beautiful finery that sparkled brighter than the city. Compared to its southern neighbor, Equestria being more Spartan and caught between several conflicting factions, the Crystal Kingdom was paradise. However, there was trouble in paradise. An attendant to the Queen of the Crystal Kingdom hurried down one hallway, her hooves clicking against the crystal floor. Resting on her back were several empty vials, failed cures for whatever had afflicted the queen. She looked around frantically for a few moments before she spotted another attendant coming towards her. "Is there any news from the ambassadors?" the first attendant asked, pawing at the ground. "None yet. The ambassadors to Saddle Arabia shouldn't arrive until tomorrow, and the ones in Equestria have said they haven't been able to reach Empress Celestia." The second attendant sighed. "Why does everything have to go wrong like this?" "I don't know." The first attendant stopped pawing at the ground and prepared to leave. "I think the apothecaries have a few more healing salves ready." "Really? I thought they said they tried everything." "They're willing to try anything if it will get those two to stop fondling each other." The attendant shuddered. "I've taken to wearing earplugs whenever they start their whole schmoopy-doo routine again." "Is it still as annoying as during the dragon incident?" "Worse." The other attendant cringed. "Can I borrow those when I go on my shift?" "Sure." "Well, I've got to go finish my round." "I believe that won't be necessary," a third voice said. The two attendant turned and saw a unicorn walking out of the shadows. The unicorn had a grey coat hidden beneath a steel grey chest plate, and he fixed the two other ponies with a cold stare, his red eyes causing the attendants to squirm slightly. "Oh, Minister Sombra," the first attendant shuffled her hooves slightly. "We didn't see you there, and, well, there is no need to apologize, although I would recommend that you stay more alert so that you do not get caught off guard." Sombra looked past the two attendants. "Any change?" And no sir. They're still fawning over each other without a care in the world." "That is troubling." The unicorn looked back at the attendants. "And everything we've tried has failed." Yes sir," the second attendant said. Perhaps you would know something." "Me? Why do you say so?" "Well, you are a unicorn and all, and you must have traveled around some, perhaps," the first attendant said. "So, maybe you've seen something like this and know how to remedy it, maybe." Sombra was silent. The two attendants looked at one another, unsure of what to do. "Actually, I do believe I know how to cure the king and queen." "You do?" The first attendant could barely contain her glee. "What is it?" "Well, I have to say that it may be a bit painful." Neither attendant could react before Sombra produced two knives and buried them in their chests. "But I suppose I could test its effectiveness on you." Down in the Crystal Plaza walked two ponies. Unlike those that they walked amongst, they lacked a connection to the kingdom's magical heart, and as such did not sparkle like the locals. They were clad in heavy grey and yellow armor, armed with large broad-headed axes, and wore the pelts of their namesake as capes. Despite their intimidating appearance, they cheerfully went from stand to stand, gathering an assortment of goods to take back to the nearby citadel. "Sir, if you don't mind me asking," asked the younger pony, a Pegasus by the name of Fellhoof. "But you didn't come here just to scout out potential rivals, did you?" "Of course not," Icewine said, stopping in front of a small fruit stand. "My father used to bring me here during some of his trips, and I found the crystal ponies to be most welcoming after a long slog through the ice and snow. Besides," the commander tossed Fellhoof a small bushel of crystal berries. "Their fruit is pretty good." Fellhoof nibbled at some of the fruit, a smile breaking across his face. "I see. Maybe we should send more requisitions here. Too expensive, but it makes for a nice snack." Icewine pulled out a large bag of bits and passed it to the shopkeeper. "Hope you don't mind carrying a few crates back to the citadel, Fellhoof." "Oh, shouldn't be that hard, sir." Icewine smiled as the younger pony made his way towards the stall to collect the fruit. The Arctic Wolves commander looked around, watching as crystal ponies went about their business, a few of the Marais giving him small smiles before trotting off a bit faster than they had before. Icewine smiled. He didn't really consider himself the type of pony to settle down, but he was still a stallion at heart and warmed himself over these moments. "Supplies have been secured, sir." Icewind turned around and saw Fellhoof carrying several large boxes in his headset's telekinetic aura. The boxes wobbled slightly whenever the Pegasus moved, but they were in no danger of spilling. "Good. We'll head back to the citadel now." The two legionnaires prepared to leave before they heard the sound of a trumpet blast. "What was that about?" "Sir. That was the trumpet to head to the Crystal Palace, but they only ever do that once a year. Maybe it's a special occasion." Icewind frowned. Around him, he could see that the crystal ponies were just as confused as he was, and they slowly began to file towards the castle. "I don't like it." Icewind turned to the storekeeper. "Can you watch over these until we return?" he asked, pointing to the crates filled with crystal berries. "Yes sir," the storekeeper said. "We shall pay you extra for your services." Icewind nodded to Fellhoof, who placed the crates down before reaching for his axe. Icewind shook his head. "Not yet, we're trying to investigate, not start a war." "Sorry sir." Fellhoof fell in place behind Icewind, the two equestrians walking up the boulevard surrounded by dozens of crystal ponies. Every pony was talking amongst themselves, confused and concerned as to what was going on. The two Arctic wolves pressed on through the crowd, careful to not injure any pony with their weapons. The ponies had gathered around a large balcony, held back by a few dozen guards in blue and gold armor. Knowing that the guards would be a bit hostile towards foreign troops approaching the palace, Icewind and Fellhoof stopped in the middle of the crown, using several other ponies as shields to hide them from watching eyes. Another trumpet blast, and the crowd fell silent. "Sir, maybe we should leave," Fellhoof whispered. "Normally I would agree, but something's wrong here, and we're too close to the citadel to just ignore a potential threat." The two soldiers looked up towards the balcony. There was movement behind the curtains leading into the palace before a unicorn stepped out. He was dark grey and dressed in a red cape and heavy armor, and his eyes were, unnatural, glowing with some kind of power that Icewind could not identify. Maybe telling Fellhoof to skip the axe was a bad idea. "Citizens of the Crystal Kingdom," the unicorn shouted, his voice carrying out over the plaza. "I bring you most distressing news. Our beloved rulers, the king and queen, have fallen to their affliction." A gasp rose from the crowd, but the equestrians did not seem that fazed. "Think it's a coup?" Fellhoof asked. "Maybe," Icewind answered as the unicorn continued. "In light of this terrible tragedy, I cannot allow our nation to fall into anarchy and corruption. Until such a time as a suitable heir can be found, I, Sombra, will take my place as king." Sombra raised a hoof. "So kneel, my fellow citizens, and together we shall prosper in this time of strife." Icewind could hear more murmuring from the crowd. The crystal ponies looked to one another, and some even looked to him and Fellhoof for guidance. Sombra did not seem to enjoy their hesitation, his face darkening. "I don't believe you heard me properly. I said kneel." Sombra's eyes flashed with power, and every single crystal pony was enveloped in dark energy. Some cried out in fright, but none could resist as they were forcibly thrown to the ground. Icewind and Fellhoof were unaffected, and with the civilians out of the way they now had room to draw their axes and advance. "Release them!" Icewind shouted, raising his axe into a guard position. Sombra looked towards the commander, his eyes filled with anger. "Equestrians," he hissed. "You dare to oppose my authority? You have no authority over me. I am Icewind, Great Wolf and commander of the Arctic Wolves, veteran of the Diamond Dog Wars and loyal servant to Her Serene Majesty Celestia, Empress of Equestria. I swore upon my life that I would defend all of Ponykind, not just equestrians, from those that would see it oppressed and destroyed, and you Icewind pointed his axe at Sombra are among that group. You wish to take over the Crystal Kingdom's inhabitants? You may as soon as the last of my blood has been spilled. You are a fool, equestrian. Your devotion to serving what you deem is good has blinded you from reality. You are surrounded, outnumbered, and your precious Empress cannot reach you here. Why would you so willingly give your life for a cause you have no chance at winning?" "Who said I have no chance?" Try as he might, Icewind could not suppress his grin, something that angered Sombra a great deal. "Know your place, equestrian. I am master of this realm, not you. But you are not master of me. Icewind smiled as Sombra passed his breaking point. This has gone on long enough. Sombra's horn shimmered and the crowd of civilians parted, leaving Icewind and Fellhoof alone in the plaza. From the shadows of the palace came numerous guards, dragoons as the crystal ponies called them, and several other ponies armed with what appeared to be claws attached to their boots. "Sir," Fellhoof said. "There's more coming from behind." "How many?" 20. 25. Probably 40. Maybe more. Oh good, for a moment I thought we were in trouble. Icewind readied his axe, checked that Fellhoof had prepared himself, and charged headlong into Sombra's forces. Amongst the legions, the Arctic wolves were considered some of the most dangerous soldiers Celestia employed. Their harsh environment and dangerous initiation rites meant that an Arctic wolf private was tougher and more experienced in the art of killing than most officers of other legions. In war, they brutalized their foes, leaving behind a field of broken bodies and shattered armor. Nothing could stand against the axes of the Northerners. Icewind and Fellhoof slammed into the enemy, the heavily armored legionnaires knocking over several with their momentum alone. Icewind landed the first kill, his axe flecked with red as he separated a dragoon from his windpipe. He swung the axe around in a downward chop, taking another enemy's right foreleg off, before leaping over the dying pony and stomping on yet another enemy as he landed. Several dragoons moved in to attack, but Fellhoof was able to intercept and dispatch them, the Pegasus' speed allowing him to strike before the dragoons realized they were being attacked. 2 dragoons lunged at Fellhoof, but the Pegasus flipped in the air and allowed Icewind to surge forward, killing the 2 with a single strike from his axe. The dragoons pulled back for a moment, allowing Icewind and Fellhoof to regroup. The enemy circled once before charging, spears leveled at the legionnaires' throats. Fellhoof could dodge easily, being a Pegasus, but Icewind was not so fortunate. The commander turned his side towards the spears and ducked, sweeping his axe for the legs of the first dragoon. Icewind's shoulder flashed with pain as one spear found a gap in his armor, but he ignored the pain. His axe connected and ripped through a dragoon's legs, showering his face with blood. Icewind rose up and, once Fellhoof rejoined him, charged back into the fray. Dragoons swarmed the legionnaires, stabbing at anything that resembled a target. "Sir, I think we might get overrun," Fellhoof said, decapitating another dragoon as he spoke. "No we won't, I've faced much worse before." Icewind knocked another dragoon's spear away. Before the crystal pony could recover the weapon, Icewind had buried the axe in his opponent's chest, shattering the pony's armor. The Arctic wolf yanked the axe out and decapitated the dragoon, the corpse collapsing to the ground and barring the path of several other enemies. Fellhoof knocked several more dragoons away, allowing the 2 legionnaires to break through and regroup. The dragoons had decided against another frontal assault against the Arctic wolves, instead regrouping and trying to herd the 2 equestrians into an area where they could not easily react. Icewind and Fellhoof tried a few feints to try and lure the crystal ponies forward, but to no avail. To make matters worse, the ponies with clawed boots had hung back from the fight, eyeing the fight with mild amusement. "Any other ideas?" Fellhoof asked, landing behind Icewind. "Their regulars can't do much, but those other ponies have me worried." Icewind shifted the position of his axe. "We need to find a more defendable position. Sir, we still might be surrounded and, well, this place doesn't really have a lot of good defensive positions. That's what they want you to think. I'll cover you and we should be able to find wait." The others are moving. The clawed boot ponies rushed forward, quickly covering the ground between them and the Arctic wolves. The lead one leapt into the air and swung at Icewind with one hoof, the commander barely managing to block the strike. Fellhoof swung towards a second pony, who easily dodged and slashed at the Pegasus. The claws did not manage to puncture Fellhoof's armor, but they were still strong enough to leave a substantial gash in the metal. All around them the new combatants ducked and slashed, each strike taking out little bits of the equestrian's armor. Icewind and Fellhoof countered as much as they could, but their lightly armored foes could easily dodge the more cumbersome axes. "When we get back to the citadel, I want the smiths to start working on short swords for this kind of combat," Icewind said as he batted away another series of strikes. "I agree with you there, sir." Fellhoof rose into the air and raced downward, striking the pavement between a group of the enemy. The ponies were knocked to the ground, allowing Fellhoof to easily dispatch them. Of course, this also exposed the young legionnaire to attack, and Icewind had to move and intercept several other ponies to make sure Fellhoof was not killed. However, rushing to protect Fellhoof did not provide Icewind a lot of room to maneuver. He was soon swarmed by 3 enemies, all of them clawing at his armor to try and break through. He blocked one and killed another, but the third landed a strike on Icewind's face. His vision in his left eye blacked out immediately as his enemy's claws ripped through flesh and bone. Enraged more than anything else, Icewind tackled the offending crystal pony and began slamming his forehooves against the enemy's head, not stopping until the pony's head was a smear on the ground. With his good eye, Icewind could see the dragoons advancing towards the fight, joined by several more of the clawed-boot ponies. Fellhoof had managed to drive off or kill most of their current foes, but Icewind could see signs of fatigue on the young soldier's face. Icewind tapped his chest plate, causing a small rune to begin flashing blue, before moving up to Fellhoof's side. "More enemies inbound, sir," Fellhoof said. "I know." Icewind stepped between Fellhoof and the crystal ponies. "Head back to the citadel." "Sir." "Head back to the citadel. Send word that the Crystal Kingdom has been overthrown and the new regime has declared war." "But sir, what about you?" Icewind looked back at Fellhoof before advancing towards the crystal ponies. "I'm going to buy you some time." "Sir Dash! Don't argue with me, you can move faster than I can, so you'll be able to reach the citadel before I ever could." "But sir, you're the commander Dash. Commanders can be replaced. Go, now." Fellhoof hesitated for a moment, but instead of protesting merely nodded and took off, racing away from Icewind and the crystal ponies. Icewind smiled slightly and continued to advance towards his enemies. The crystal ponies stopped about 20 yards away from Icewind, sizing up the injured equestrian. Losing his eye had lost him a bit of depth perception and made it more inconvenient to watch his enemy, so he could not properly gauge just how many ponies he was facing off against. All he knew was that he was injured, tiring out, and badly outnumbered. Icewind did what any other Arctic wolf would have done in his situation: he charged. He fell upon the enemy like a pony possessed, swinging his axe in mighty arcs and ripping through dozens of ponies. Spears, armor, claws and flesh could not stop his charge, the only thing slowing him down being the numerous fresh corpses beneath his hooves. Onward through the line he pushed, chopping and kicking at anything he saw, blood splashing over his coat as he continued his rampage. Some of the younger dragoons turned and fled, hoping to escape Icewind's wrath. However, one pony alone, even one as strong and as skilled as Icewind, cannot stand against an army. For every 3 ponies the Arctic wolf killed, 3 more wounds were added to his body. His blood mixed with the blood of his enemies, staining his armor a deep crimson color. A spear point slipped through another seam of his armor, slowing him down slightly, and soon Icewind found himself swarmed by ponies slashing and stabbing him with as much fury as he had unleashed upon them. And still the only thing they received from him was a scream of rage. King Sombra walked through the war-torn plaza, several bodyguards flanking him. The bodies of the dead were being gathered by his newly acquired slaves, and from the amount of carts being dragged away Sombra guessed he had lost close to 50 soldiers. "No matter," he thought. "They can be easily replaced, and the death of the equestrian has given me a bit of an advantage." He stopped before the butchered remains of Commander Icewind. The slaves had not yet reached the equestrian, too busy pulling dead and dying dragoons away, but Sombra had made sure that 2 squadrons of his shock troopers were watching the corpse constantly. The commander's armor, while broken into dozens of pieces and scratched almost beyond repair, could be reversed engineered, giving Sombra a better advantage over his enemy. He smiled, images of thousands of armored ponies marching across the land, crushing everything in their path. "The smiths have been notified, yes?" he asked the lead shock trooper. "Yes, my lord." "Excellent." He smiled again. "Once our new armor has been completed, we will march south and show the equestrian's precious Empress who is the true power in this world. Relay your orders, and then we shall dash." Sombra stopped, turning all of his focus towards Icewind. Obscured by blood was a small rune, which moments before had been flashing blue. Now, though, it was bright red, and he could hear a small whine rising from the fallen equestrian. Sombra had little chance to react before the entire plaza was consumed by light as the self-destruct spell activated. Fellhoof's chest hurt as he raced towards the citadel. He had always been a strong flyer, but the stress from the recent fight and the worsening weather threw his flight pattern off. He had considered dropping his axe or some of his armor to save weight, but knew the smiths and rune priests would throw him to the wolves if he did so. He took in another gasp of air and pressed on, silent prayers to the Empress keeping his stamina strong. After what seemed like an eternity of flying, Fellhoof saw the silhouette of Aesir Pass, the Arctic wolves' citadel, through the fog and snow. While not as elaborate as the fortresses of the south, it served its purpose of providing security and control over a vast stretch of territory. The dark grey masonry, weathered after decades of standing against the elements, was a welcoming sight to Fellhoof, and he drew upon the last of his wing strength to press on. Fellhoof tripped as he landed, causing him to slam into the heavy oak door of the citadel at high speed. His impact drew several shouts, and soon he was surrounded by 4 other Arctic wolves and a rune priest, their weapons raised to strike. "Peace, it's only me," he shouted, trying to pull himself back to his hooves. "How can we be certain that you aren't a spy trying to infiltrate the Legion?" asked the rune priest, an old unicorn by the name of Raven Eye. Fellhoof glared up at him. "Don't be an ass, Raven Eye. Who would go through all the trouble to come this far north just to infiltrate our Legion?" It was a dumb counter-argument, but Fellhoof was stressed and could not think up a better justification. Raven Eye's horn lit up, and Fellhoof could feel the rune priest's magic probing his mind for any signs of deception. This continued for about a minute before Raven Eye released him. "At ease, brothers, he is Fellhoof." Fellhoof sighed in relief as the other warriors lowered their weapons. "Now, what brings you here in such a hurry, young one?" "The Crystal Kingdom has been overthrown." There was silence amongst the assembled legionnaires. "Come, we must tell the other lords." Raven Eye walked back into Aesir Pass, Fellhoof following closely behind. The other legionnaires broke off to close the gate, shouting for reinforcements as they did so. "How soon can we get a message to the Empress?" Fellhoof asked. "Patience, young one. We do not know the full extent of what transpired, and as to why you are alone. Rushing into this may result in many unnecessary casualties." Fellhoof wanted to contest that point, but deep down he knew that the rune priest was right. Fellhoof tugged at his armor a little and kept following, trying his best to keep up with Raven Eye and look as calm as possible. The 2 ponies approached a large oak door, beyond which lay the hall of the Wolf Lords. Except on days of celebration, only the lords and the rune priests were allowed to enter the hall, and Fellhoof hesitated as he and Raven Eye neared the door. "Why do you hesitate, Fellhoof?" the old unicorn asked. Well, I'm not supposed to go in there." "Fellhoof, you're overthinking things again. We are being threatened and all you worry about is traditions." "I'm sorry Don't apologize to me. You are young, and you still need to learn a lot about being a capable commander. Now come, we have wasted enough time as it is." Fellhoof nodded and the 2 ponies entered the hall. By a stroke of luck, several of the Wolf Lords were already present, talking amongst themselves about some other matter. "Lords," Raven Eye said, his voice echoing through the vast expanse of the hall. "Whatever matters you are dealing with will have to be put on hold." Priest Raven Eye, the leading Wolf Lord said, nodding his head slightly. "I take it by the sound of the others mobilizing that you come bearing bad news. And I thought that you enjoyed mobilization as a chance to enjoy a bit of combat. Perhaps you have spent too much time around the ever-free sentinels and have gotten soft." 2 of the younger Wolf Lords chuckled, but out of respect and understanding rather than mockery. The leading lord did not respond to the others' laughter. "Archanus is a respected ally, but he thinks too much. Now, what would be so important that you bring in this young one?" The lord pointed to Fellhoof. "I shall allow him to speak his piece." Raven Eye and the assembled Wolf Lords looked to Fellhoof. He swallowed before speaking. "Lord Icewind and I were in the Crystal Kingdom gathering supplies when there was a signal to assemble in the plaza. Upon arriving, some unicorn by the name of Sombra dash. Sombra? Are you sure? Raven Eye interrupted, the old unicorn looking much more worried than before. I believe that's what he called himself. Why? It doesn't matter right now. Please continue. Well, Sombra announced that the rulers of the Crystal Kingdom had died because of some affliction, or some sort of nonsense, and that he was to take their place as king until further notice. They seemed hesitant, so he used some kind of spell to force them to kneel. And you and Icewind were not affected, another wolf lord asked. No, my lord, I think it was targeted only towards crystal ponies. Such a spell is possible. Raven Eye said. Difficult to master, but possible. Go on. Lord Icewind and I tried to oppose them, and there was a fight. We killed many but we were overrun. Icewind stayed behind to allow me time to escape. Silence hung in the air. Fellhoof looked to Raven Eye for a sign, but the rune priest was not focused on him. Rather, his horn was shimmering and he was muttering some spell, and before long a small stone popped in front of his face. The great wolf's soul stone is cold, Raven Eye said. Commander Icewind has fallen. There was a murmur amongst the younger wolf lords. What do we do now? Fellhoof asked. The lead wolf lord looked towards him. We'll just have to continue on without Icewind. Priest Raven Eye, the wolf lord turned towards Raven Eye. You knew Icewind better than any of us. Once this crisis has passed, you will be in command of the legion until a new great wolf is chosen. I understand. And as much as I would like to face this King Sombra for killing Lord Icewind, we can't risk the chance that we may be overrun and expose Equestria to invasion. We could send out a smaller force to distract and harass his army until reinforcements arrive. That is an option, but we must make sure we actually have reinforcements on the way. Contact the Empress and any other legions that may be available, and then we can fight this war properly. How soon can an army reach us? Another lord asked. 2 days, at least. Raven Eye said. I have made the journey south many times over many paths. We should have enough supplies, weapons, and ponies to hold out for that amount of time. Any civilians that might impair our defenses will have to be evacuated. They'll need protection, the second lord said. We'll think of something. The first lord turned towards Fellhoof. Fellhoof, right? You will assist me in sending the message to Everfree and the other legions. Yes, my lord. Luna was alone again. Celestia's avatar had returned to Philadelphia about an hour ago, and with no administrative work to speak of she had found herself with nothing to do. She considered finding some of her soldiers and talking to them, but since the only one she could find was Silverlight she was forced to discard that plan. She wandered the halls of Everfree Castle, listening for anything and anyone. There is a pony approaching, the voice said. I feel that they come bearing good news. Why do you say that? This will be your chance to prove yourself. My lady. Luna turned around and saw a messenger running towards her, a note clutched in his telekinesis. Urgent message from the Arctic wolves. Oh? Has my sister been informed? No, my lady. The messenger passed off the note to Luna. Luna broke the seal to the note, unrolling it and scanning it as quickly as possible. Crystal Kingdom overthrown. Commander Icewind presumed killed in action. Request immediate reinforcements. Lord Blackmane, 3rd Company. Your subjects have been attacked, and now you have a chance to prove your worth in battle. Gather your legions and head north, teach the Crystal Kingdom to fear your name. But my sister. She will not know, much less care. Now you have a chance to enforce your will, and you would throw it away just to please your sister? No. Good. Now, assemble your legions. My lady? Is something wrong? The messenger asked. I'm fine. Luna tucked the note away. Take a message to the Lunar Knights, Black Ravens, Drake Guard, Night Warriors, Iron Stallions, and the Stalliongrad Guard. Only those legions? What of the other legions, like the Wonderbolts or the Siege Breakers? The others will not help me. Now, send a message to those legions that they are to assemble for war against the Crystal Kingdom. I will give them further instruction once they arrive. Yes, my lady. Should I notify the Empress of this development? Luna opened her mouth to speak, but hesitated, telling Celestia would be better strategically, but she could hear the voice telling her no. Also, Celestia would most likely want to take control of the campaign herself, and Luna did not wish to risk that. No, I shall inform her myself. Yes, my lady. The messenger bowed and left. Soon, all of Equestria will revere you and sing praises in your name, and your sister shall see you as an equal if not her better. Yes. Yes, she will. Thirsty for vengeance against the Arctic wolves, Sombra had ordered his army south, towards the Legion's citadel. 5,000 dragoons, accompanied by 2,000 elite shock troopers, all marching towards Equestria and the Arctic wolves. The wolves, however, were waiting for them. Fellhoof hovered over the first wall of the citadel, his axe dangling next to him. Lord Blackmane and Raven Eye stood beneath him, joined by the rest of 3rd and 4th Company. The rest of the Arctic wolves, save the company sent to escort the refugees to the border, were waiting to respond, small groups reciting hymns of battle and preparing their weapons. With any luck, Sombra will try and attack the citadel and break his army here. Blackmane said. What if he doesn't? Fellhoof asked. Then he doesn't, but I don't think he will. We're the only settlement within reasonable distance, and the only route into Equestria. Unless he wants half of his army to freeze to death, we're the closest targets he has. But he has dark magics, who knows what he might be capable of. That is a true statement, but any magic cannot be sustained indefinitely. Raven Eye said. I would know. Also, you provoked him, and all rulers tend to get obsessive to potential blemishes to their reputation. Backstabbing dictators care about their reputations. Fellhoof asked. Blackmane would have responded, but he was cut short by a returning scout, the Pegasus breathing heavily in an attempt to catch his breath. Lord Blackmane, enemy forces have been spotted. Where? Heading towards the western flank. I'm not sure about numbers, but I would guess several thousand. Sombra underestimates us if he thinks only a few thousand can win him this fight. He may have more in reserve waiting for us to be worn down. Fellhoof said. True. Blackmane turned back to the scout. Alert the other commanders, then return to your post. Yes, Lord. The scout saluted and flew off. Blackmane unhitched his axe from the clamp on his armor, tapping it against the ground in anticipation. Fellhoof tugged at his armor once more, looking first to Blackmane and then to Raven Eye before looking back out at the surrounding landscape. They were spotted soon after. They came out of the fog, marching slowly towards the citadel. Their armor, normally sparkling from the magic of the Crystal Kingdom, was dark and flecked with small marks of Sombra's presence. All of the ponies present, save the foremost shock troopers, seemed glum and somber, but the Arctic wolves could not tell if that was from dark magic or not. Priest Raven Eye, Blackmane said, not taking his eyes off from the advancing army. I trust that you have a way to deal with this army. Yes, I do. Allow me to demonstrate. Raven Eye's horn shimmered before 3 red streaks shot up into the air, exploding high above the citadel and showering the battlefield in light. There was a pause before a multitude of green streaks rose above the fortress, pausing for a moment to locate Sombra's army. Once the crystal ponies were spotted, the streaks shot forward and exploded amongst the massed ranks of shock troopers and dragoons, magic blowing apart bodies and armor with ease. The army stalled under the assault. Their momentum and chance at gaining the element of surprise shattered before a second salvo slammed into their ranks. The Arctic wolves' magical onslaught was halted, however, when several purple discs rose above the dragoons, deflecting the magic bolts and allowing the army to advance. Raven Eye sent up another signal, and the salvos of spells relented for a moment. Archers! Blackmane shouted. 3 volleys. There was a shout of confirmation before a multitude of black arrows flew over the wall and into the ranks of the crystal ponies. The discs, designed to repel magical attacks, could do little to stop the arrows of the Arctic wolves, and more fell into the snow as arrowheads punched through armor and bone. A few of the repulsion discs quivered and fell, and the wolves renewed their magical bombardment to exploit the weaknesses in the crystal ponies' defenses. The crystal ponies are increasing speed. Adjust volleys. Another cry of confirmation before more arrows fell amongst the crystal ponies. Sombra's army increased its speed to avoid the attacks, although a few were still struck down by the wolves. As they neared, several of the shock troopers hurled small glowing gems towards the walls, their small size making it hard for any rune priest to intercept them. Blackmane, Fellhoof and several other nearby Arctic wolves ducked just as the crystals exploded, blowing several chunks out of the wall and showering the legionnaires with tiny slivers of rock. The heavy armor and thick wolves' pelts that the legionnaires wore shielded them from the worst of the blasts, but several were cut down by the high-velocity shards. With fire from the walls slacking off a bit, the crystal ponies were able to cover ground with fewer casualties, and more of the exploding gems came sailing over the masonry. "Aim for the shock troopers!" Blackmane shouted. "Kill any pony that even looks like they might throw something." Fellhoof. "Lord," the Pegasus asked, landing. "Gather up several Pegasi and prepare to strike the enemy if they try to scale the walls. That might expose us to enemy attack. That's a risk we'll have to take. Go, now." Fellhoof nodded and took off. The archers and rune priests had regrouped and were now pouring fire down at the massing crystal ponies, focusing primarily on the shock troopers. Spells exploded amongst the enemy, showering them with snow, rock, and severed limbs, but not slowing their advance. As the crystal ponies advanced, Blackmane noticed the shapes amongst the dragoons. From far away they were hidden, but now he could see that the dragoons had several large ramps in their arsenal. Now that they were close enough, several groups broke off from the main force and rushed forward, carrying the ramps and using them as impromptu shields against the arrows of the wolves. It was then that Fellhoof's force struck. They swooped down the side of the wall and hit the flanks of the dragoons, allowing the crystal ponies no room to maneuver. The first caught a downward swing from Fellhoof, the legionnaire's axe splitting armor and bone and almost cleaving the pony in half. The other Pegasi in the group descended upon the crystal ponies, hacking them down and destroying two of the ramps. However, the destruction of the first two ramps came at the expense of the others reaching the wall. With heavy iron hooks they latched into the stone, and the crystal ponies surged towards them. The ramps were wide enough for 4 ponies to ride abreast, and a squad of dragoons began charging up each of them, followed by a large number of shock troopers and other dragoons. Blackmane stepped off to one side of the nearest ramp, axe lowered for an upward strike. Just as the dragoons reached the wolves, he swung upward and took the nearest enemy's face off, the corpse pitching over the other legionnaires and tumbling into the snow below. Blackmane grabbed the fallen dragoon's spear in his teeth and twisted around, swinging the spear in a wide arc and burying the tip in a shock trooper's eye. Now with a little more room to maneuver, he leapt up onto the ramp and attacked, his axe cutting huge swaths in the crystal ponies. Fellhoof's force regrouped and charged the ramps, knocking several ponies to their dooms and slowing the advance in this section. Small victories, but the crystal ponies pushed on. The speed of the shock troopers allowed them to outmaneuver and kill several wolves, and their numbers meant that it was nigh impossible for the legionnaires to repel them. As more and more crystal ponies pressed in, the Arctic wolves began to yield, small footholds growing in size despite the horrendous casualties. The sun was sinking in the west, and the Battle of Aesir Pass was only beginning. There was a shimmer of light in the main courtyard of Everfree Castle. At first the servants and guards paid it little mind, but their interest grew as the shimmering increased. There was a brief whine before Celestia teleported into the courtyard, sword grasped in her telekinesis and Philomena perched on her shoulder. "My lady," the nearest attendant cried, rushing towards her. "We did not expect you back until dash. Where is my sister?" Celestia growled, fixing the attendant with a cold stare. We don't know, my lady, she left with her legion yesterday, I assume heading for Aesir Pass. Why was I not informed?" I don't know, my lady. I was not the one who brought news of the attack." "Then find me the one who was. And hurry," the attendant nodded and raced off, while Celestia put away her sword and walked off in the opposite direction. "Philomena, you have keener eyes than I do, had Luna been acting strangely before she did this?" A few chirps. "Don't be like that, something's been off about how she's been acting around me. She snaps at me, she keeps going on about her duties, and now she's run off to fight a war without telling me." A chirp. "I have every right to be concerned, she is my sister, and I do not wish to see her hurt." A few chirps. "Horus knew when he was going beyond my orders." A few chirps. No, punishing her may only worsen the problem. I will have to discuss what her duties cover and that charging ahead into a war zone will not be tolerated. Celestia stopped walking. I'm an idiot. Philomena cocked her head to one side and chirped. I should have been more clear about Luna's duties. A chirp. Yes, I know I said her word would carry the same weight as mine, but I didn't say she could start wars behind my back. I suppose I shall have to remedy the issue once this crisis is averted. Celestia was drawn from her conversation by another servant running towards her. My lady, the servant bowed. I was the one who gave the message of the attack to Luna. Why wasn't I informed? She stated that she would be the one to inform you of the development. Celestia's jaw tightened. Just what are you up to, Luna? She turned to Philomena. Stay here until I return. The bird nodded before taking off to some other part of the castle. Celestia turned back to the servant. You are dismissed. Contact the remaining legions and inform them of the attack, and await further instructions. Yes, Empress. The servant rose and ran off. Celestia planted her hooves and focused her power, hoping to pinpoint Luna's exact location and teleport there. However, when she tried to draw in power for a teleport, something held her at bay. An unknown force shrouded Luna, making it impossible for Celestia to locate where she was, much less teleport to her. Growling, she spread her wings and took flight, turning north and racing forward as fast as her wings could carry. I only hope I can reach her in time. Most of the first wall had fallen. Crystal ponies had poured into the citadel, fighting to solidify their foothold and prepare for a thrust towards the central keep. The remnants of 3rd and 4th Company, however, were fighting savagely to hold them off, despite there being fewer and 100 of them left. Blackmane tossed another dead dragoon over his shoulder before charging into the next squad. As a commander he had been specifically targeted by the crystal ponies once they gathered more troops, but this had the advantage that the other legionnaires were not as hard-pressed. Not that he knew this, or really cared. Blackmane had been on his own for some time now, Fellhoof having been caught up in melee further down the line and Raven Eye having fallen back to better protect the Legion's archers, and he was perfectly capable of fighting on his own. The squad before him broke as he slammed into it, but not after several dragoons fell to his axe. He stepped over the fallen corpses of crystal ponies and equestrians, searching for more foes. When he spotted another group of enemies, he charged forward, sweeping his axe in wide arcs and cleaving the first dragoon in half. Another lunged at him with a spear, but he deflected it before burying his axe in the enemy's head. His axe otherwise stuck, he spun around and bucked, catching another dragoon in the face and snapping the pony's neck. As the other dragoons struggled to reach him, Blackmane retrieved his axe and plunged back into the melee, his axe and wolf pelt becoming stained red with blood. The dragoons were breaking easily enough, but the shock troopers were a bit more resilient. They worked in smaller, more fluid formations, using their speed to outflank and confuse the legionnaires. They skirted the very edge of Blackmane's angle of attack, ducking in occasionally as if to taunt the Wolf Lord. He growled and pulled his axe back into a guard position, waiting for the enemy to strike. The leader of this band of shock troopers sized him up for a moment before charging, followed by 2 other crystal ponies. Blackmane stepped back and turned his body slightly, allowing the first blow to strike his armor while still giving him space to counter-attack. The leader pulled back, but the other 2 leapt into the air and struck out with their clawed boots, carving large gashes into one of Blackmane's pauldrons. Blackmane swung his axe around, but only succeeded in clipping the tail of one of his attackers. The others ducked away and lunged forward again, adding more cuts to his armor. Blackmane backed up, stepping over the body of a fallen dragoon. The shock troopers circled, searching for openings, before the one on the left darted forward. Instead of striking out with his axe, Blackmane kicked the dragoon corpse at the shock trooper, catching the pony off guard and causing the trooper to stumble. Seeing an opening, Blackmane rushed forward and eviscerated the shock trooper, knocking the corpse towards the remaining 2 crystal ponies. Know this, servants of Sombra! Blackmane shouted, raising his axe once more. I am Blackmane, Wolf Lord and loyal servant of Icewind and Equestria. My ancestors tamed this land eons before your kind even had a coherent thought. I have slain wolves and other beasts with my bare hooves, killed diamond dogs and minotaurs in service to my lord and my empress. And you? You are nothing compared to a true warrior, and I will slaughter you and your ilk with nary an ill thought." The shock troopers must have taken offense to this, for they stopped circling and charged forward towards Blackmane. "For Icewind," he bellowed before rushing towards his foe. The first shock trooper caught his axe between the teeth, separating both halves of the pony's skull. The last shock trooper ducked and slashed at Blackmane's legs, claws managing to find flesh and drawing blood. The Arctic wolf twisted around and brought the axe down once more, but the shock trooper sidestepped and slashed again. Blackmane ducked and smacked the shock trooper with the flat of his axe, knocking the crystal pony to the ground. The shock trooper rolled away before Blackmane could deliver the finishing blow, but not before inflicting another wound to the wolf lord. The shock trooper prepared for another charge, but was stopped when a spearhead burst through his chest. Blackmane pulled back as the shock trooper died, Fellhoof yanking the spear out and tossing it away. "I had the situation under control, Fellhoof." "Sorry, my lord. I didn't know that." Blackmane looked Fellhoof over. The Pegasus was flecked with red, but other than a nasty wound to his right hoof and a badly damaged pauldron he was all right. "I guess his name is more than accurate right now. Have you made contact with the other companies?" "Yes, my lord, but not before the enemy reached them. 5th and 7th have taken heavy casualties, and 10th is pinned down outside the keep. I haven't seen Priest Raven Eye. He'll be fine. Search for as many survivors as you can and make for the keep. We may be able to regroup before we get." Blackmane was interrupted by the sound of horns coming from the west. Those are not horns from the Crystal Kingdom. Luna's army had assembled on a hill overlooking the battlefield. Below, the forces of the Crystal Ponies tried their best to form up to face this new threat, but so many were already within Aesir Pass or laying dead that they could only muster less than 1,000, a pathetic amount when compared to the 6,000 ponies massed before them. Luna and her legions were silent, looking down as the Crystal Ponies prepared as best they could to weather the oncoming onslaught. "Your chance for glory has arrived, strike now, before they can fully mobilize. Take no prisoners, and make them fear you. Begin firing on the enemy. Lunar Knights, Drake Guard, and Black Ravens will advance with me. I care not for prisoners, kill anything that is not an Arctic wolf." Her commanders nodded before shouting orders. Swords were drawn, crossbows strung, armor checked one last time, before Luna's army began their advance. The legions behind her fired off their first salvo of bolts and arrows, although amongst the already thinned ranks of the Crystal Ponies their effect was minimal. The dragoons amongst the assembled forces would have tried a flanking maneuver, but being pinned against the walls of Aesir Pass did not allow for that, and running out into the snow and away from the citadel would cut off those inside. The only options available for the Crystal Ponies were either hold position, charge, or retreat, all of which would lead to either their destruction or the death of their peers. Luna made the decision for them. Charging up power, Luna fired a bolt of lightning amongst the enemy, causing an explosion that sent dozens flying. The Lunar Knights halted just long enough to fire a salvo of magic and crossbow bolts before the Drake Guard and Black Ravens charged in, swords at the ready. Not wanting her legions to fight alone, Luna teleported amidst the Crystal Ponies, hacking and stabbing at anything with her swords. She ducked and twirled through the enemy, a deadly dance that claimed the lives of dozens as she and the legions advanced. "Hold nothing back. Take pride that you are destroying your foes," the voice whispered in Luna's ear. She smirked as she charged into another group of dragoons, her swords ripping through armor as if it was paper. Upon seeing her and the destruction she wrought, several Crystal Ponies either broke and run or tried to surrender, only to be cut down by the advancing equestrians. The Black Ravens broke from the main force and headed for Aesir Pass, flying over the side and descending on the Crystal Ponies still inside. Caught between the remaining Arctic wolves and Luna's army, the Crystal Ponies were thrown into a panic, dozens falling as the equestrians rallied. Some of the legionnaires pulled back, either from general exhaustion or satisfaction that the enemy was defeated. The Drake Guard, elements of the Black Ravens, and Luna were not content with that, charging after the Crystal Ponies and striking at them as they fled. Luna's armor was splashed with snow and blood, and once again her eyes briefly shifted to become green and cat-like. With a thin smile she rose into the air and built up more power, lightning and dark energy swirling around her. I have stepped out of my sister's shadow. I am the master of darkness, and no one shall ever keep me shackled. I am Luna, and you shall fear me. With a thrust of her hoof she released her power, a solid beam of light engulfing the rear ranks of the retreating army. No remains were left after Luna's attack, only small marks in the snow where ponies had once stood. She would have released another attack, but already she was beginning to feel the strain of magic depletion. She put away her swords and landed before turning and walking towards the Batter Citadel. You did well, Luna. Really? Yes, your combat skills and leadership are far beyond that of any pony alive. Your sister is a fool if she thinks that you are subservient to her. Luna smiled again as she neared the citadel. Her soldiers were assisting the Arctic wolves with gathering up the dead, separating the fallen legionnaires for proper burial while discarding the fallen crystal ponies. Luna stood back and watched over the proceedings, taking a quick count of the casualties as she did so. The Arctic wolves seemed depleted. No matter, they can replace them easily enough. Don't worry about casualties, Luna, the enemy is already massing their forces, and now you must strike them before they have a chance to muster their full strength. Are you certain of this? Would I lie to you? Again, Luna thought that a second voice called out to her, but that was interrupted by an actual voice. Mistress Luna. Luna turned and saw an Arctic wolf, bloodied from combat, kneeling before her. Lord Blackmane, Wolf Lord of Third Company. Ah yes. You were the one who sent the message. Indeed, my lady. Many of us have fallen in battle today, and we thank you for arriving to relieve our position. Luna smiled, newfound energy welling up inside her. Thank you. She turned her attention back to the battlefield. But we cannot stay here for long, the enemy is in retreat, and we must exploit their weakness as soon as possible. Gather your forces, we march for the Crystal Kingdom as soon as possible. This received a scoff from Blackmane. With all due respect, my lady, we have just finished fighting a battle for our continued existence. While I would love to go and kill every single crystal pony I could find, we'll need some time to rest and regroup before we can think about attacking. When Blackmane was finished speaking, Luna's left eye twitched. Are you defying my orders? No, my lady, I am just pointing out that you may be a bit hasty. Hasty? Hasty? How dare you say I am being hasty? I am taking advantage of a presented chance, and doing so will defeat the enemy definitively and give us victory. No, what you're doing is throwing tired troops right into the enemy fortress. The enemy is retreating, and you have seen that in force we can defeat them. Rest, my lady, and tomorrow we will head out and defeat the enemy. No. No. I cannot wait. The chance for me to grasp victory is slipping away every second I wait. I order you to gather your forces and prepare to attack the Crystal Kingdom. I do not think it is tactically or strategically sound. The Arctic wolves will not participate in this fight. Gritting her teeth, Luna drew one of her swords and aimed it at Blackmane. You are defying me, Blackmane. You swore an oath to obey dash. I swore an oath to serve my Lord Icewind, and he swore that we would defend and serve all of Ponykind, not just you. Shut up. Luna's eyes once again shifted to green and cat-like. I am in command here. This is my fight. Mine. Not any else's. I make the decisions, I make the plans, I am in control of everything. Don't make me destroy you, you pathetic waste of flesh. Go ahead. At least I'll die knowing that I did not lead my brothers to their deaths. Luna raised her sword, fully prepared to take Blackmane's head off, but she hesitated. Most of the anger that had built up inside her dissipated, and her eyes returned to their normal shade. Very well, she lowered her sword and turned away. Stay here and wallow in your sense of security. My legions and I will go and destroy the Crystal Kingdom, and where will the brave and loyal Arctic wolves be? Waiting in the hills to finish the job once your army is broken, your majesty. Luna gritted her teeth once more and continued walking. Will you tolerate such defiance? He is only a lowly company commander, not a general. I know that. He shall pay for his insubordination in due time. Until then, I have a war to win. Of course, do not want you to get distracted, now do we? I'm getting too used to teleporting, either that or my wings really are this weak. Celestia thought as she neared Aesir Pass. She could spot some damage to the citadel, but she did not see any of Luna's forces. She adjusted her flight pattern and landed, coming to a rest with a small bounce near the entrance of the citadel. "Hail, Guardians of the North!" she called. "Hail, Empress," was the reply before the heavy doors of the citadel opened, a small delegation of ponies marching out to her. The leader, an earth pony in a blood-stained wolf's pelt, kneeled before speaking. "Lord Blackmane, Empress. My associates are Fellhoof, Wolf Brother and a trusted friend of mine, and Chief Rune Priest Raven Eye, acting Great Wolf." Acting. Lord Icewind fell fighting against the enemy. There was a pause. "I am sorry for your loss. Now, where is my sister?" "Gone, she and her army left to attack the Crystal Kingdom early yesterday morning. I tried to dissuade her and have her soldiers rest, but she didn't listen to me." "And you didn't go after her?" "I should have, but I didn't. I said that our forces had been depleted and we needed to recover. Probably bad judgment on my part, a few of our companies barely suffered any casualties, and the other lords are screaming for my head because I turned down a chance to take vengeance for Icewind's death." "You will have your chance. Thank you, Empress. Also, when I told Luna of my plans to stay here I don't know what, but something happened to her." "What do you mean?" "She became violent, and her eyes shifted, or something. I'm not really sure what happened." Celestia frowned. "Luna's never done anything like that before. Continue repairs, but remain on alert. Kill anything that approaches the citadel and does not hail. I will go now and confront my sister." "Will you be needing an honor guard? If she doesn't listen, you may need protection. Can you spare the troops?" "I can always look. I would like to volunteer," Fellhoof said, raising his good hoof. "I was there with Icewind when he fell. I do not mean to sound boastful or disrespectful, but I would say I have more claim to avenging him than most other ponies here." "Well, there's one," Raven Eye said. "Be mindful, though, Fellhoof is young, and likely to do rash things. I have dealt with many warriors like him," Celestia said. "I would like to see the rest of your forces, so I may have a chance to assess them and your fighting strength." "Of course, Empress. Follow me." The Crystal Kingdom had changed, and not for the better. Shops, libraries, and homes had been abandoned, their tenants sent to labor harvesting crystals. Black spires had sprouted from the ground, destroying plant life and choking the earth. Statues of once proud rulers had been defaced and destroyed, replaced by monuments to the kingdom's new ruler. Dragoons and shock troopers roamed the streets, hunting for any pony that might have tried to escape, and dozens of makeshift gallows had been set up around the city. "Sombra has worked faster than I anticipated," Luna muttered. "When one has command over magic, feats such as this are relatively minor. Can you show me these powers?" "I can, but first you must establish your supremacy. Now, your enemy is unaware, but still in significant numbers. Proceed with the attack, before they realize what is happening. Signal the Iron Stallions," she said to a nearby unicorn. "Have them commence bombardment, and have the rest of the legions prepare for attack." The unicorn nodded before sending 3 red sparks into the air. There was a pause before Luna could hear the sound of siege engines firing, massive stones hurtling through the air before crashing down amongst the crystal ponies. Dragoons and shock troopers rushed to form up and counter the assault, while slaves were abandoned to whatever fate had in store for them. "Not fast enough," she muttered. "Have them increase speed." The unicorn nodded before sending another signal. There was a pause before a return signal could be seen. "They say there's firing as fast as they can," the unicorn said. "I can read signals. Tell them that that's not good enough. I want them to fire faster." "But dash. Do it." "Why yes, my lady." The unicorn sent the signal. Luna focused on the battlefield before her, not even acknowledging whether or not the Iron Stallions responded. The bombardment continued nonetheless, although the crystal ponies had formed up and thrown off the equestrians' targeting. The enemy held back, waiting in silence as the Iron Stallions lay into them. "Why aren't they charging?" They're supposed to charge. Luna pawed at the ground, carving small fissures in the ice. This isn't supposed to happen. Why are you allowing the enemy to control you? Take initiative, attack now. Luna nodded before stepping forward, drawing her swords as she did so. Archers, fire 4 volleys, after which we will charge. Try to get around and cut them off from support. Do not mind the prisoners. There were several shouts of confirmation before her archers fired, crossbow bolts and arrows arching over the 2 armies before falling amongst the crystal ponies. Some were struck down by the volley, but even then they remained stationary. As another volley was unleashed, Luna lowered her swords and charged, all of her legions save the iron stallions following after her. Spells and more crossbow bolts shot out and struck the crystal ponies, and as the equestrians neared the enemy began to retreat back into the city. Some of the legionnaires realized the danger and slowed up, but Luna and the others pressed on. Just as the equestrians reached the enemy line, the crystal ponies sprung their trap. Luna swung her sword towards the head of a dragoon, only to hit air as it vanished from sight. Every single crystal pony that had formed up vanished, leaving several hundred equestrians still rushing into the city. Did you really think I was going to let you slaughter my troops that easily? A voice called from the shadows. There was a brief flash before King Sombra teleported in front of the equestrians, a large sword grasped in his telekinesis. I may be impulsive, but I am not stupid. Sombra. Luna raised her swords into a guard position. You have attacked my subjects, and now you must die. Interesting, that was the same thing your ally Raven Eye said to me 30 years ago. I would suggest digging a little deeper into his loyalty before you trust him with anything again. Do not try to distract me, Sombra. Oh, but there are so many useful reasons for me to distract you. Sombra's horn shimmered, and dozens upon dozens of shock troopers came pouring out from the black spires, descending upon the legions and cutting many down. After you routed my armies at Isir Pass, I perused through the memories of a few slain ponies and found that you in particular are incredibly impulsive when it comes to charges. I guess trying to impress your sister constantly had something to do with that. Shut up. I was actually disappointed when I found out it was you leading the attack. Facing Celestia would be refreshing, for lack of a better term. Shut up. Luna lunged forward, sweeping her swords towards Sombra's head. Sombra blocked and knocked Luna back with a spell, the 2 ponies circling each other while their armies clashed around them. I am not my sister. I am more than her, and you shall suffer for that insult. Heh, you're like a child throwing a tantrum. I would find this endearing if defeating you were not higher on my priorities. Sombra rushed at Luna, bringing his sword down towards her head. She deflected his strike and swept her free sword around, missing Sombra by mere inches as he ducked away. Luna fired a blast of lightning, but Sombra had disappeared, showing up only moments later with a buck to the face. Luna recovered, but not before Sombra had rushed in once more and knocked her to the ground. She rolled away, recovering her swords as she did so, while Sombra circled around once more, looking for an opening. You cannot defeat me, Sombra. Luna growled, charging up for another magical blast. I am more than just any pony. I am the most powerful pony to have ever walked the earth. Second to your sister. Enraged, Luna released her attack, but Sombra was able to dodge it with ease. My sister is nothing compared to me. I am more than just some second-rate ruler, I am Luna. Of course you are, but to the ponies of Equestria you will always live in your sister's shadow, won't you? Sombra blocked another strike from Luna. I'm actually glad that Raven Eye cut me off. Now, I can build myself into whatever kind of pony I desire, unlike you. You will always be shackled by your sister, even if she acknowledges that you tried your best to win here. I am not shackled by my sister. Yes you are. Sombra blocked another flurry of strikes, grinning as Luna's rage increased. Why else would you be here if you are not trying to win her attention? You are nothing, really. You're only your sister's beloved attack dog, rushing forward to do whatever you think might please her. No, I'm not. Really. Sombra broke away, his eyes and horn glowing with dark energy. Would you like to see just how much you rely on your sister? Luna lunged forward one last time, but a beam of dark energy shot from Sombra's horn and struck Luna between the eyes. She found herself back at Everfree Castle, the snow and crystals of the north having disappeared. She put her swords away and walked towards the throne room, searching for Enippon. When she entered, she saw Celestia seated on the throne, dressed in full battle armor. Her sword was set to one side, and she looked down at Luna with a cold stare. Luna paid it no mind. Celestia always seemed to be serious when attending to issues of state, and seeing her now did not raise any alarms. "Ah, sister, I was expecting you," Celestia said. Luna raised an eyebrow at Celestia calling her sister rather than Luna, but stepped forward regardless. "Really? I'm not really sure about what's going on. Is this an effect of the spell? That doesn't matter now." Celestia fluffed her wings. "I suppose you know why I called you here." No. That's not surprising. I was just going to inform you that I don't need you anymore." Luna's mind shorted out for a few moments as she tried to comprehend what Celestia had just said. What? You heard me. You have become too much of a liability, and I will need some pony else to stand alongside me if I am to truly consolidate my power. Luna blinked. Is this because I asked for more duties? I only wanted to dash." "No, Luna, this has nothing to do with what you want. This is what I want. I operate better on my own, without having others close to my power to worry about. It almost killed me before, and I will not have that again. But I have been with you for millennia. You can't just dash. None of that matters now. Leave, before you make this any worse." No. I won't let you do this. You have no right to dash." Luna never finished, for Celestia sent forward a wall of force which knocked her back and pinned her to a wall. Celestia rose, her eyes glowing with rage. "How dare you say what rights I have and don't have? I am the god Empress of Ponykind, the forger of worlds, the morning star. I created this world and forged this nation. I am solely responsible for Equestria's success, not you, not anybody else, me. I will not be lectured by a disgrace like you, and I am ashamed that I even considered calling you sister." Luna's bonds were released, and she collapsed limply to the floor. She looked up, tears streaming down her face. But dash. No, I'll have no more of it." Celestia turned away. "Get out of my sight, I never want to see you again." "But I only wanted to dash." Luna collapsed again, her body shaking from her sobs. Tears streamed down her face and over her armor, collecting in a small puddle beneath her. "No, please no. No. Luna was shaken from the spell when a beam of fire sailed over her head and struck Sombra in the chest, sending the unicorn flying. Second later Celestia leapt over her, eyes blazing and sword drawn. The Empress of Equestria makes her presence known." Sombra retrieved his weapon, just in time to block a strike from Celestia. "I should thank you, your sister did not prove satisfactory at all." Celestia was silent, delivering strike after strike as she pressed forward. "Although she did provide me with some entertainment. You equestrians are always so complex." Celestia did not answer, only sidestepping Sombra's strike before blasting him into a wall with her powers. "But then, you seem to be rather above it all. It makes sense that you might ignore your sister's pleas." Celestia's gaze narrowed, and her horn shimmered with power. "You kill one of my most trusted commanders, attack and kill dozens of ponies, and threaten my sister. And you dare to try and trick me. It's quite easy, anything you say only digs you in deeper and deeper." "Really?" Celestia smiled, a thin predatory smile that would have scared even the staunchest of soldiers. Burn! Sombra had little time to react before his body was engulfed in warp flame, the supernatural fire burning through armor and flesh with ease. He tried to struggle, tried to break free and escape, but as Celestia's gaze darkened the flames grew higher and more intense. Luna had gotten back to her hooves by now, and even from where she stood she could feel the heat of the flames consuming the late king of the Crystal Kingdom. With Sombra dead, the crystal ponies were left leaderless. Their ranks and formations collapsed into total anarchy, with some continuing to press on while others broke and ran. Realizing the advantage, the legions rallied and charged, hacking and stabbing away at the retreating enemy. They would have pursued them further, but held back in case Luna needed them. Once most of the body had been burned away, Celestia released her spell and turned towards Luna. "Are you all right?" "Why yes, I'm fine. How did you get here?" "That doesn't matter now, Luna, what matters is that you are safe." Celestia stepped forward and nuzzled Luna. "When you ran off without telling me, I panicked and rushed here to see if you had everything under control." She says that, but does she really mean it? Celestia stepped back, smiling. "But now that you are safe, I know that my fears are unfounded." "Are they, now?" a voice echoed through the streets. Celestia and Luna turned, and where Sombra's body had been was now a column of smoke with two massive green eyes glaring down at the ponies. "I should thank you, Anathema. If it weren't for your intervention then my ascension as a Prince of Chaos would never have been completed." "Sombra." Celestia drew her sword. "That is King Sombra," the shadow said, leering down at her. "I am the rightful ruler of the Crystal Kingdom, or should I say the Crystal Empire. The crystal ponies are mine, and soon you will join them." Sombra's eyes glowed, and the entire city began to shimmer. "Sister, what is he doing?" Luna asked. "He's trying to pull the Crystal Kingdom into the warp." Celestia put away her sword and rose into the air. "All legionnaires retreat. Get as far away as possible from the city." "Retreat!" The message of retreat rang out through the city, and soon every single equestrian left standing was rushing away, with Celestia and Luna taking up the rear with Sombra right at their heels. "There is no escape, Celestia. You shall be trapped here, and your soul forfeit to the true powers of the universe." "No, Sombra." Celestia turned, keeping just out of reach of Sombra. "I have destroyed many of your kind in the past. This land is not a prison, but it shall be your tomb." Celestia's horn shimmered and a beam of light struck Sombra. Sombra roared in anger as he disappeared into nothingness, but as he vanished the entirety of the Crystal Kingdom flickered and was gone, leaving the equestrians alone in the ice and snow. Luna landed, looking back at where the Crystal Kingdom had stood only moments before. Of all the battlefields she had seen, seeing an entire city just gone, with no sign whatsoever that it had been there, was unnerving. She averted her eyes and looked back to her legions, focusing on them even as Celestia landed. "The kingdom is lost," Celestia said. "For now, at least. Someday I will try and find a way to release it and drive Sombra from this realm forever. Until then, let us be thankful that we have defeated a great threat, and Equestria is saved. See? She is trying to take away your victory. Will you allow that?" "We." Luna spat. "There was no we here. I led the legions, I defeated the crystal ponies at Aesir Pass, and I led the attack on Sombra. I am the one responsible for our victory. I never meant to say that it wasn't you, I was referring to the legions as a whole." "Really?" Luna turned to face Celestia, glaring at her. "Is that it? The legions as a whole? Is that what your loyal servants declare every time you win a battle? Was the war against the Diamond Dogs a victory for the legions as a whole? Or are you just saying that now because you want to deny me of what truly belongs to me? How can you say such a thing? I would never try to deny you anything, but if it weren't for the legionnaires then you would have been dead many times over." "That's not true. I am powerful, but you just keep me in the rear while you go off and win over every pony's admiration. I don't want to be sidelined anymore. Luna, I have never intentionally tried to steal anything that any pony has deserved. And you do receive admiration, I've seen dozens of ponies singing your praises and smiling at the sound of your name." "No, you don't. You're lying." Celestia stepped towards Luna. "Luna, please, listen to me dash. No, you listen to me. You're always trying to divert the truth from me. You're always keeping me suppressed, keeping me away from everything. I'm tired of you saying I've never tried to steal anything any pony deserved because that's all you've done since you took over Equestria." "Luna dash. No. I don't want to hear anything from you anymore." Luna shoved Celestia away, her eyes blazing with fury. "I hate you." Celestia looked at Luna, shocked and hurt. "Luna. I only want to dash. No, I don't want to hear any more of your lies. Luna turned away, spreading her wings as she did so. I'm going back to Everfree. Celestia watched as Luna flew away, the younger alicorn disappearing in a flash as she teleported back to Everfree. For the longest time she stood in silence, watching the spot where her sister had disappeared. I hate you, she said, lowering her head and looking at the ground. Luna, whatever I did to you. I'm sorry. I know I haven't been the best sister I could have been, but I still love you. She sniffed, turning away towards where the Crystal Kingdom used to be. Through the snow she saw something, a light, flickering as if it was damaged. Drawing her sword in case it was a trap, Celestia stepped out into the snow, walking towards the light heedless of the ice around her. It was a crystal, half buried in the snow. It was untouched by corruption of any kind, and continued to flicker as she neared it. Sensing no immediate danger, Celestia put her sword away and observed the crystal. Sensing nothing more, she reached out with her powers and grasped the crystal. She was standing on the bridge of a ship, in the body of a human. She was well built and clad in her old armor, although she retained her pastel hair rather than her old black hair. She looked around, but there was no one there, only machines and computers responding to other stimuli in the room. However, closer examination showed that she was not alone. In the center of the room stood a man, a majestic human clad in shining armor and a flowing cape. He had his back to her, but even then she could tell that she was seeing herself. Before the avatar of her past was a second human, clad in silver Terminator armor. The second human was kneeling, his right hand placed over his chest. But as she looked harder, she saw that he was clutching his chest, and he had been badly wounded. Why do you resist, my son? Her old self said, stepping towards the second human. You know that what I am doing is for the best of humanity. The best of humanity is to suffer under a cruel dictatorship. Horus asked, before the Emperor raked him across the face with his lightning claw. You know the truth, Horus, humanity cannot survive if they are allowed to continue on as they are. With my new plans, they will have order. You've placed too much order upon them, Emperor. Horus said, standing up to face the Emperor. Humanity will stagnate, never growing beyond the limitations you have imposed upon them. Where will ambition and drive come from if doing anything will get them executed? Horus made an attempt to strike the Emperor with his power maul, but he merely sidestepped before driving his sword up under Horus' arm. I have always supported that which pushes humanity forward. Is that what you said when you slaughtered Fulgrim and Ferris at Istvan V? Or when you killed Sanguinius on Terra? The Emperor did not respond, instead withdrawing his sword and slashing Horus across the chest, his sword stained red with the Primarch's blood. I was wrong. You don't understand what I am trying to do, you are wrapped up in your emotions and honor, you cannot see the true design for the galaxy. You have failed me, Horus, and I will find someone better suited for your tasks once you are dead. Horus lunged forward, using the last of his strength to attack the Emperor, but he sidestepped once again before bringing his sword down on Horus' arm, severing it and knocking the Primarch to the ground. Celestia could not move, she was rooted in place by fear and confusion, watching as her son was torn apart. This isn't supposed to happen like this, she thought. I should be the one losing. She watched as her past self plunged his sword deep into Horus' stomach, the Primarch choking as the blade pierced flesh and vital organs. Then he looked up at her. She reached for her own weapons, but found nothing. The Emperor regarded her for a moment before pulling his sword from Horus' body. This is what you wanted, isn't it? He asked before turning, leaving Celestia alone with the dying Horus. No. Not like this. She rushed down from the bridge and ran to Horus, kneeling and cradling him once she reached him. Horus? Horus? Emperor? Horus said, his eyes weak and unfocused. Yes, it's me, I'm here. Choking back tears, she took Horus' remaining hand in hers, holding it as tight as possible. I'm here, Horus. I'm here. This isn't the body you are familiar with, but I am here. Emperor. Father. I'm sorry, but I tried. Horus gave one last smile before his eyes closed, his body going limp. Celestia watched as the Primarch died, her breath choppy from suppressed sobs. No. Please, no. You can't be, not again. I can't. Unable to hold back any more, Celestia threw her head back and screamed. It was a piercing sound, one that had lasted throughout the centuries, one that not even the gods could avoid. It was the scream of a mother, crying out for her dying son. Empress! Empress! Celestia was drawn back to reality, back to the snow and ice of the north. She looked around and saw Fellhoof and the other Arctic wolves that had accompanied her, all of them looking to her with concern. Are you okay? No. I'm not okay. Celestia rose, turning towards the Arctic wolves. Take the crystal and store it where Napani will be hurt by it. I must return to Everfree. I need to talk to my sister. There was silence in the room. Cadance and Shining Armor looked to one another, unsure of what to do, while Twilight looked up at Princess Celestia. Celestia sat with her head hung, a small tear running down the side of her face. I never got that image out of my head. You're young, all of you, and I hope that you never have to go through what I did. Having to relieve the pain of losing a child over and over again, never able to forget, never able to forget. Please don't cry, Princess. Twilight said, standing up and walking over to Celestia. Please. I don't want you to cry. I'm sorry, Twilight, but some things are just unavoidable. But it makes me sad when you cry. Twilight put a hoof against Celestia's armor. If you want, you can stop telling the story. I won't mind. No, Twilight. Celestia smiled, placing her hoof gently against Twilight's. You need to hear this, and, telling you, it helps. It helps a lot. Twilight was silent for a few moments, but then she nodded and returned to her seat. Celestia wiped away her tears and continued. I stayed with the Arctic wolves for a few days, helping them rebuild from the war. Now that I look back, I should have head straight for Everfree, because while what happened to me was bad, something terrible happened to Luna. Luna paced her room, her armored boots clicking on the floor. Do you need any more proof of your sister's manipulations? No. I can see clearly now. Celestia has lied to me, manipulated me. It's far worse than I could ever have imagined. I doubt that you will stand for this. You must act. Yes. Yes. I am in position to act. I will show her. I will take that power for myself, and claim what is right and fair. Luna blinked. She was standing in the middle of the room, her swords grasped in her telekinesis. A memory had surfaced, old, but still fond. It was a memory of when she received her cutie mark, when she had raised the moon for the first time. You must never lose faith in your own abilities, for there lies temptation and falling to chaos. Celestia had said. How? Say some pony was smarter than you, and you got jealous. Now, a normal pony would go and study, devoting their time to texts and knowledge to learn what the others were better at. However, some would think themselves too inadequate to gain such intelligence, so they looked for other ways to become the others' equal. They make deals, commit rituals, ask favors for intelligence. They swore allegiance to powers that they could not hope to control, all in the name of something that could be easily gained. In the end, they gain their intelligence, but their mind lies shattered and their soul forfeit to the dark gods. I'd never do anything like that. I hope so. She was right. Luna lowered her swords. I lost faith. I got jealous. Oh gods, I was trying to betray my sister. Luna dropped her swords and staggered back. You would let yourself be drawn in by old lies? No. I was deceived by new lies. I lost my faith, I lost my trust. You tricked me. You said she was against me, when all this time she was trying to warn me. It's all deception. She planted those lies in your head so long ago. No. I am not going to listen to you anymore. You wanted me to turn against her, and for what? So I could get some stupid admiration. Isn't that what you wanted? You clouded my vision, you made me look elsewhere, you made me jealous of my own sister. You are an awful, horrible creature, and I am going to tell my sister everything. Luna started for the door, but before she reached it every joint in her body seized up. I cannot allow that to happen. I had hoped that you would come into my service willingly, but I guess I will have to do this the hard way. What? Release me! I cannot do that, you were mine the instant you told your sister you hated her. The voice laughed, and Luna's mind was filled with images, snakes, ravens, flies, bulls and other creatures flooded her mind, choking out anything that remained there before. She tried to fight back, but more power flowed into her, crushing her attempts at resisting. Luna cried out in fear, before the darkness swallowed her up. She rose up to her hooves, looking around the room. She reached out and grabbed the two swords, using a quick warp manipulation to forge them into a single blade. Yes, she hissed. Finally, a body from which I can affect the materium directly. Soon, all shall tremble at my might. Soon. Equestria will burn.